Marc Zornes, Engagement Manager, McKinsey Company. Explain more about resource resolution, which you co-authored.
Well, effectively what resource revolution is it's an attempt for us to begin to think about the resource issues that we face in an integrated fashion. What we did was we looked at the world's natural resource needs for energy, food, water, and minerals over the next 20 years, examined exactly what it would take to actually meet that demand through increased supply or through increased productivity, and thought about the economic implications as well as some of the opportunities in improving resource productivity to actually be able to deliver that.
Well, what were some of the conclusions?
One of the very interesting conclusions was that first, there is an enormous resource productivity opportunity. We quantified that from a societal perspective, there is $3.7 trillion of resource productivity opportunities out there, of which 90% from that same societal perspective actually makes economic sense. The other factor we found was that what's really driving a lot of some of the issues we're seeing today is 3 billion new middle-class consumers. While many people talk about the 7 billion on the planet today and the 10 billion in the future, we believe that it's this next 3 billion middle class that's going to be coming into consuming and sort of purchasing their first automobile, their first refrigerator, increasing their meat consumption, where we really need to focus our thinking and our efforts, because that's what's going to put the resource constraints in the world over the next 20 years.
Isn't it already too late?
I would argue not. We certainly need to have a sense of urgency. But there's a lot we can do in terms of driving these benefits, specifically in areas such as improving building energy efficiency, reducing food waste, reducing municipal water leakage, which is the piping and sort of the loss in the water from where it goes from the water plant to the end consumer, as well as a host of other areas. But we have to move quickly. I believe it was the IEA that recently said that we're quite close to locking in what we would call a 2-degree increase in global temperatures. Unless we begin to take action now, we're going to lock that in and potentially even something worse.
You make the point that the resource supply and productivity challenges will be far from easy. Only 20% of the potential is readily achievable and 40% will be hard to capture.
So what we did was we established a framework through which we thought about the barriers to actually achieving these opportunities. And we looked at those barriers in terms of how difficult they were, but also how many barriers you faced in actually trying to overcome these challenges. To give you an example, in reducing food waste in developing countries or emerging markets, you face significant challenges in the fact that there is not enough infrastructure to be able to transport those goods. You face the fact that the economic incentives at times may not necessarily be there for the farmer to be able to do that. And so these things begin to actually compound. Things that had multiple barriers we cited as difficult. Things that had one major barrier we cited as some challenges. And then where there was no real significant barrier and we thought it was something that was quite feasible, we looked at that as being a readily achievable opportunity.
Policymakers, you say, should consider action on 3 fronts.
So first we say it's actually 4 fronts. And we look at 4 key things. Number 1, it's about taking an integrated approach. When we looked at the cross-resource issues, what we found was that when you were to prioritize some of the areas to improve efficiency or improve productivity, the solutions that were at the top of the list were not necessarily the ones that were at the top of the minds of people today. Examples of that are increasing farm productivity, reducing food waste, and reducing municipal water leakage. The second issue is around actually strengthening market signals. This is around the fact that today there are $1 trillion in resource subsidies, and that it's very difficult and many times for people to have the economic incentive to be able to act. Number 3 was actually removing some of the other market failures that you face. Some of these can be agency issues, which, for example, I rent a house, I don't own that house, and the incentive for me to make improvements to that building to improve its energy efficiency necessarily may not be in line to the true advantage that it would be if for the owner and occupier were the same. And then finally, it's about increasing resilience. It's really the poorest over the next 20 years that are going to be most impacted by some of these resource issues. For example, in some countries, up to 70% of one's income is spent on simply food and energy. And volatility in resource prices, specifically food prices and energy prices, are most damaging to those. So setting up the safety nets, ensuring access to those resources is a key issue that we need to think about over the next 20 years as we address this challenge.
Marc Zornes, thank you very much.
Thank you.